The sun dipped low over the skyline, gilding the towers of Astoria Grand Hall in a burnished amber glow. Its massive doors, carved from mahogany older than the country itself, opened not for the public, but for the chosen, the descendants of names stitched into the fabric of boardrooms and bloodlines. Inside, a hush had settled, refined and reverent. Crystal chandeliers, imported from Vienna and worth more than entire houses, glimmered overhead, casting thousands of fractured rainbows onto the polished marble floor. Velvet curtains in royal hues swept dramatically at the edges of the stage. Soft chamber music drifted from a live quartet, stationed discreetly in the gallery. This wasn't just a graduation, this was a coronation, an unspoken passing of torches, from one generation of wealth to the next. The guests, seated in rows of gold-trimmed chairs arranged with obsessive precision, looked as though they'd stepped from the pages of fashion editorials. Silk gowns, tailored tuxedos, heirloom jewels. Champagne rested delicately in fluted glasses beside leather-bound programs printed in real gold foil. Each name announced was a headline waiting to happen. Each graduate has a preordained success story. And then, the doors opened again. No fanfare, no music, just a hush that thickened the air. And in stepped a girl who did not shimmer. Her name was Isla Bennett, and she wore a simple ivory cotton dress, no embroidery, no designer signature, just neat seams and careful stitches, made by hands that worked long nights in low light. The hem swayed slightly as she walked, brushing against her knees. Her shoes, plain, scuffed loafers, whispered against the marble. She had pulled her dark hair back into a single braid that trailed over her left shoulder, a braid she had redone 3 times that morning, hoping it would look just enough. It wasn't enough. Not here. The first to notice was a woman in the second row, lacquered nails wrapped around a champagne flute, her neck heavy with diamonds. She leaned in toward her seatmate, her eyes fixed on Isla. "Who let the help in?" The man beside her chuckled, adjusting the cufflinks on his Brioni suit. "Maybe she's with catering," he murmured back. Isla heard none of this, but she felt it, the way the room seemed to shift around her, air tightening, heads turning, how voices dulled just enough to let whispers rise. Like smoke through silk, she didn't stop, didn't hesitate. Not even when a small knot of students at the edge of the aisle leaned toward one another, with barely contained snickers. "I think she thinks she belongs here. Is that Cotton?" Oh my God. Isla's breath stayed even, though her lungs fluttered beneath her ribs. She had walked harder paths than this, through storms, through debt, through the slow humiliation of being brilliant in a world that only applauded wealth. But today was supposed to be different. She had earned her place. Every late night in the library, every skipped meal, every extra shift at the tutoring center, every moment her mother had dragged herself home from the night shift at Penny's diner, shoes soaked through, eyes heavy, still asking, "Did you eat, baby? Did you study?" Isla had studied. She had soared, top of her class, highest GPA, the official valedictorian. But now, walking into this hall, she felt the weight of every unpaid invoice and every judgmental glance pressing into the cotton fibers of her dress. Still, she kept walking. Her name was printed in the program, in alphabetical order, among the brightest. She was supposed to give a speech. She was supposed to sit in the diamond section, the front rows reserved for student leaders and top donors' children. She reached the first checkpoint near the stage, where a cluster of event coordinators stood like guardians at a gate. One of them, a woman in a slick black blazer, stepped forward, headset tucked into a perfectly sprayed bob, clipboard in hand. "Name?" she asked, eyes flicking over Isla without warmth. "Isla Bennett," Isla replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The woman glanced at the clipboard. Her eyes lingered for half a second too long. Her expression didn't change, but something about the curve of her mouth tightened. "You're not on the speaker list," she said flatly. The words floated in the air, soft, almost apologetic in tone, but sharp enough to slash. A ripple of silence spread around them. Isla blinked once, then smiled gently, politely, the way girls are taught to do when they're about to fight through bureaucracy. "There must be a mistake," she said, reaching into her folder and pulling out the printed email from the dean's office confirming her role. I was confirmed as valedictorian. This was sent 3 days ago. The woman barely glanced at it. She stepped slightly forward, her voice raised just enough to draw attention from the surrounding rows. Please step aside, Miss Bennett. You're not on the program. We have a strict timeline. Her tone had changed. No longer clipped, now deliberate, public, humiliating. Isla's hand trembled faintly. She tucked the email back into her folder. Behind her, students craned their necks. Some stared blankly. Others smirked. A few angled their phones. Somewhere in the fifth row, Savannah Crown, daughter of media moguls, heir to the Crown Group, whispered into her friend's ear, "Is that the scholarship girl? The one from the Diner family?" The friend giggled. "Oh, God. I thought that was a joke." Isla stood frozen, unsure whether to push back or walk away, but the choice was made for her. The event coordinator stepped aside and motioned toward the back with her clipboard. "Security will help you find a seat." A polite lie. An elegant dismissal. The silence in the room grew thicker. A velvet noose. The chandeliers above gleamed like cold stars. The marble beneath her feet gleamed but offered no anchor. Isla nodded once. She did not cry. She did not protest. She stepped away, slow, careful, her shoulders drawn but unbowed. Each step away from the stage was a small betrayal. Of her effort, of her mother's sacrifices, of every late night she whispered dreams into her pillow and promised herself it would all be worth it. Somewhere, someone snapped a photo of her walking down the aisle, cotton dress swaying, a word folder tucked under one arm, dignity wrapped tightly around her like a second skin. By the time she reached an empty seat near the back, the first hashtag had already surfaced online, "Cotton at the Crown," and outside, standing beneath the warm dusk light, Eva Bennett watched the live stream on the oversized public screen. She saw her daughter, alone, small, visibly stunned. She pressed a trembling hand against the image. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered. Inside, Isla lowered herself slowly into the chair. The hall continued around her, glamorous, gleaming, untouched. The quartet resumed playing. The next name was called. The next air smiled for the cameras. But in the very last row, a girl in a cotton dress sat like a crack in the marble, small, silent, unmoving. And something in the foundation of Astoria Grand Hall began to shift. The quartet played on, their bows moving in elegant synchronization, as if nothing had happened. As if a girl hadn't just been dismissed from the stage she had earned, as if her silence hadn't echoed louder than any overture. Isla sat near the back of the hall, her hands folded in her lap. Her fingers trembled slightly, hidden beneath the smooth, pale plaque resting against her thighs. Her breathing was steady, but each inhale scraped the edges of her ribs like glass. The chair was too plush. The room is too ornate. The space around her suddenly felt cavernous, like she'd been swallowed whole by a building that was never meant to hold her. The voices started softly at first, just murmurs. Is she still here? You'd think she'd leave after that. Then came the laughter, featherlight, controlled, the kind meant to be overheard but never owned. Someone tell her it's not a church service. You don't just walk in wearing cotton. That dress must have come from a lost and found bin. The words drifted like smoke through the air, thick and choking. Isla stared straight ahead. Blinking slowly, she imagined herself as stone, smooth, cold, impermeable. But the sting crept in anyway. She thought of the night she stayed up until 2 a.m. in the library while her stomach grumbled for dinner she couldn't afford. She thought of the old textbooks passed down by sympathetic professors and the bus rides she took instead of cabs, because every dollar mattered. She thought of her mother, scrubbing grease off diner floors, leaving notes on the counter. "Don't forget your protein bar, baby." And smiled today. And then she thought of Savannah. As if summoned by thought alone, Savannah Crown sat 3 rows ahead, her back as straight as a pageant queen, her gown a sculpted sea of emerald satin that shimmered under the chandeliers like polished envy. She tilted her head slightly to the side and whispered to the girl beside her. The girl, blonde, glittering with laughter, turned and cast Isla a look of bored disdain. Savannah smiled. Not wide, just enough. Then, with a flourish, she lifted her phone. The camera's shutter made no sound, but Isla saw the lens. Pointed directly at her, she saw the quick finger tap. The caption was typed with casual elegance. Within seconds, the screen glowed. Atsav Crown, tragic thrift store moment. Northbridge fails, #cotton crisis. It was live before Isla could even react. Her face, her dress, her posture, all captured in an unflattering side angle, her discomfort frozen mid-frame. By the time she shifted her weight in her seat, the post had 800 views. By the time she blinked, it had 3,000. She reached for her phone, instinctive, but stopped. What could she do? Post her resume? Her GPA? What would that change? The girl beside Savannah leaned over and added with a smirk, "She's trending." A few rows away, Julian Hartford, son of a banking magnate, known as much for his father's scandals as his own smug charm, lifted his phone as well. He zoomed in on Isla's feet. The faded loafers, the modest, scuffed leather. He posted without even pretending to hide it. Breaking, janitor's daughter infiltrates diamond section. Thoughts. #made in Northbridge, #valedictragic. The comments flooded in. Did someone check if she actually goes here? Plot twist. She's an unpaid intern. This speech better come with a mop. The glow of screens multiplied. Blue light reflected in polished jewelry. Laughter buzzed low but incessant, like a hive circling fresh prey. Isla sat still, her hands gripping the edges of her plaque. She wasn't ashamed of her shoes. She had worn them to job interviews, to internships, to exams that changed her life. They had carried her across 1,000 finish lines. But now, here, beneath velvet drapes and judgmental stares, they had been turned into punchlines. A professor in the aisle across leaned toward a colleague. "I suppose it's noble letting them in." Yes, but noble doesn't always mean appropriate. Their words hit her harder than the students' posts. She could excuse the cruelty of the young. Arrogance often bloomed early and loudly. But from the faculty, the ones who had graded her essays, praised her research, and pushed her forward, that betrayal was deeper. Isla's throat burned. Her jaw clenched so tightly she thought her teeth might crack. Still, she did not cry. She would not here, not in front of them. Outside, beneath the towering screen broadcasting the live stream, Eva Bennett watched helplessly. The video feed showed a tight frame of her daughter, alone in her seat, surrounded by a sea of luxury and disdain. The camera lingered just long enough to catch a napkin landing near her feet, tossed by a boy in the row behind. Another student, laughing too loudly, mimed cleaning the floor with an imaginary mop. Eva covered her mouth, her fingers trembling. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not now," she whispered. "Not when she needs my strength." Back inside, Brody Langston, towering, smug, and as overconfident as he was overfunded, rose from his seat. He stretched, casually, and made his way down the aisle toward Isla. Eyes followed him, like a camera pan. Even the quartet faltered slightly in their rhythm. He stopped beside Isla's row and crouched slightly. "Mind if I ask something?" he said, loud enough to project. Isla didn't respond. Brody smiled anyway, the kind of smile you wear before stepping on something. "You win some award?" He gestured vaguely to her plaque. She nodded once, her throat dry. "Valedictorian." He blinked, mock surprise overtaking his features. "Really? You?" "Not." A clerical error. The students nearby laughed. Isla's lips parted, but she said nothing. He leaned a little closer, just wondering. Was it hard to focus on school while bussing tables? The laughter this time was louder, less restrained. Someone hissed, "Ask her to refill your glass." Still, Isla sat, unblinking. Brody rose, satisfied. "Didn't mean to interrupt," he said with exaggerated courtesy. "Enjoy the rest of the show." He returned to his seat, the crowd around him high-fiving as if he'd landed a punch. Isla's hands clenched tightly around the edge of her plaque. Breathe. She focused on the marble swirl of the floor, counted the breaths. 1, 2, 3. But somewhere inside her, something was shifting. This wasn't just exclusion. It wasn't even mockery. It was a message. You don't belong. You never did. And no matter what you earned, what you achieved, the right dress code, the wrong last name, would always speak louder. The music swelled again. Another name was called. Another heir stepped onto the stage. Isla remained seated, unmoving, unflinching. Her plaque sat heavy in her lap, not a trophy, a shield. Time began to distort. Each second stretched long and brittle, as if the hands of the great hall's gold-rimmed clock refused to turn while she sat in that chair. Isla's eyes stayed fixed on the stage ahead, though the ceremony blurred before her. The weight of the plaque across her lap felt heavier now, not just from its brass edges, but from the silence it carried. A speech she had written, rehearsed, lived, stripped away with a clipboard and a sentence. The murmurs around her hadn't died. They'd simply learned to whisper behind screens. Glowing rectangles hovered like vultures above polished knees. Some were filming her. Some were snapping close-ups of her shoes. Others had shifted to memes, reusing the image Savannah Crown had posted earlier, this time edited with bucket and mop emojis layered beside her name. Sweep it up, scholar. Hashtag floor decor. Hashtag Valletta cleaner. The cruelty wasn't even clever. It didn't have to be. It had weight simply because of who said it and who stayed silent. Across the aisle, a girl in a designer black gown looked down at Isla's hands. She nudged her friend and said, without even trying to lower her voice, "Look at how hard she's gripping that plaque. Like it's going to fly away." Her friend glanced and laughed. "Poor thing. She's clinging to the only thing she'll leave with." The first object hit Isla's feet, only moments later. A crumpled napkin. It landed softly on the marble floor, almost soundless, but the intent behind it cracked like a whip. Isla glanced down at it. Her eyes didn't widen. Her expression didn't shift. She looked up again, calm, composed, but her fingers moved on the plaque, just slightly, a tremor. From 2 rows behind, Julian Hartford leaned forward with an exaggerated sigh. "Let's help her feel at home," he said. Another napkin sailed forward. Then a paper straw wrapper, a discarded program, folded in half, a satin ribbon from a gift bag. The space around Isla's seat began to fill, not fast, not all at once, but with quiet, practiced rhythm, like a ritual they'd performed before. Tiny tokens of derision, of mockery, nothing large, nothing that would get them caught. It wasn't loud enough to stop the ceremony. It was not obvious enough for the administration to intervene, but it was there, debris, deliberately scattered like breadcrumbs toward the edge of humiliation. From the stage, the announcer's voice echoed, "Summa cum laude honors to Emerson Lynn." Polite applause. Isla didn't move. Her posture remained the same, hands clasped on the plaque, legs crossed at the ankle, shoulders squared, but the space around her had been transformed. From a graduate's seat to a garbage ring, Savannah, ever the director behind the curtain, leaned over again. She really should start picking that up before someone slips. Be a shame if she caused a hazard. More giggles. Someone tossed a bent straw toward her feet. It bounced against the hem of her dress. Still, Isla did not bend, did not touch it, but her nails dug into her palm. There was blood beneath her skin. She could feel it pressing, a small burning reminder that she was still human, still alive, still angry. A few seats down, Brody Langston, with his slicked back hair and the smugness of someone who believed the world owed him applause, stood. He didn't look at the stage. He looked at Isla, with all the ceremony's attention still centered on the next name. Brody took his time strolling down the aisle. He moved like someone who had never been told no. Phones turned to him instinctively. He crouched near Isla's row and picked up one of the napkins. He held it out to her like an offering, but his eyes gleamed with contempt. "Come on, Bennett," he said, voice mock gentle. "Do what you do best." Isla looked at him. And just looked. Her eyes didn't narrow. Her mouth didn't move. But something in her silence stung. Brody hesitated. His smile faltered. He dropped the napkin again and stood up, brushing off invisible dust from his pants. "That's all right," he added, louder now. "Maybe you clean better when no one's watching." Behind him, laughter, loud this time, rippled through the back rows. Julian Hartford snapped a photo of the scene, the scattered trash. Isla seated in the middle of it, still, composed, eyes forward, and captioned it. "Cotton Throne, Trash Court, #Valletta Trash." Even some faculty chuckled. The professor 2 seats down whispered to one another, "It's getting a little theatrical. What did she expect, coming dressed like a maid in a palace?" None of them stopped it. None of them said her name. They didn't need to. In their silence, they co-signed it all. Across the room, a girl in a silver-blue gown stood. "You should really leave," she called out, projecting. "This is becoming uncomfortable for everyone else." Isla remained still. Her pulse thundered in her ears, but her body refused to shake. Outside, Eva Bennett watched with a hand over her mouth. On the live stream, the camera caught it all. The growing pile of trash, the tilted heads of students pointing, the mocking smiles. Eva's knees gave out. She dropped to the pavement beside the metal barricade. A woman nearby tried to help her up. Eva waved her off. Eyes locked on the screen. "She's still sitting," she murmured. "She's still sitting." Back inside, Isla adjusted her grip on the plaque. Slowly, deliberately, her fingertips touched the engraved lettering, not to reassure herself, but to remind them, "I earned this. You cannot take this. I am here because I fought my way here, and I'm not leaving for your comfort." From the stage, another name was called. More applause. The program continued, but the audience, the real one, the digital one, the one outside and watching, had begun to notice something else. The hashtag Isla Bennett had started trending, not just because of the ridicule, but because of the footage, clips of her sitting in silence, of napkins fluttering at her feet, of boys smirking and girls pointing, of her unmoving, like a monument to something forgotten but unbreakable. The comments began to shift. "Why is no one stopping this? She's not moving. Look at her. I wouldn't have lasted 10 seconds. She's sitting in it like it's a throne." The tide was turning. Quietly, globally. Inside, the hall hadn't noticed, but outside, the world had started watching, and Isla Bennett, surrounded by garbage, bathed in judgment, silenced by cruelty, sat taller than anyone else in the room, because while they threw scraps at her feet, she had already built herself a throne. The ceremony's music faded into a hush. A spotlight shifted slightly toward the stage. The air shimmered faintly, whether from the golden lights or the growing pressure in the room. No one could quite tell. The dean stepped forward with practiced grandeur. "And now," he announced, voice booming across the velveted auditorium, "the moment we've all been waiting for. The valedictory honors." A pause, just long enough for the camera to refocus, for anticipation to ripple like silk. This year's top scholar, our valedictorian, is a student of incredible drive, passion, and perseverance. Heads turned, even those who had mocked now straightened slightly. "Ladies and gentlemen, Isla Bennett." The words echoed into stillness. Isla stood slowly. Her body moved before her heart caught up. She rose from her chair, surrounded by discarded napkins, torn paper, and sneers, and took her first step forward. A few gasps flickered through the crowd. Some whispered. Others reached for their phones. The walk to the stage felt like walking underwater. Her breath caught on the edge of her throat, and her fingers gripped the plaque harder than she realized. Her cotton dress shifted with her movements. Soft, clean, still beautiful in its defiant plainness. Her shoes, scuffed and silent, tapped softly across the marble floor, and her eyes, steady, sharp, tired, remained locked on the podium she had dreamed about for years. Outside, on the massive live stream screen, Eva Bennett stood frozen, Hands clutched together. Tears streaked silently down her face. "She's doing it," she whispered. Inside, the camera followed Isla up the marble steps. And then it happened. Just as she reached the center of the stage, hand lifting to the microphone, the edges of her speech folded neatly in her palm, a figure stepped out from the wing. A woman, slender, sharp-suited, headset tight behind her ear, clipboard in hand. Miss Caldwell. Her heels clicked decisively as she crossed the stage and intercepted Isla in full view of every guest, every student, every camera. Her voice, amplified by the small mic at her lapel, rang loud and cold. "I'm sorry, you're not on the official speaker list." The words slammed against Isla's chest like a blow. A collective silence swept the room. Someone in the front row chuckled. Someone else whispered, "She really thought they'd let her speak." Isla's mouth opened slightly. "There must be a mistake. I submitted my speech weeks ago." "I was told." Miss Caldwell cut her off. Her eyes held no emotion. Her clipboard didn't even shake. "Please step down, Miss Bennett. The program is final." Gasps broke like glass across the room. Even the musicians had stopped. Up in the rafters, the camera zoomed in, catching Isla's stunned expression, the tiny tremor in her fingers. From somewhere in the crowd, Savannah Crown's voice carried, "Guest charity cases don't get speeches." Laughter followed, harder, louder, like an applause line from a cruel sitcom. Miss Caldwell gestured to the stairs. Her voice grew sharper. "You're holding up the program." On the live stream, Ava pressed her fingers to the screen. No, please don't," she whispered. But the feed didn't stop. Everyone could see her daughter's breath catch. The words Isla had prepared, 12 of them, burned inside her throat, unspoken. Behind her, a projector lit up, ready to display slides Isla had never been given access to. Miss Caldwell tilted her head, eyes narrowing. A warning masked as professionalism. "Step down, Miss Bennett." Silence again. Not even whispers now. The crowd hung in suspense, waiting. Would she cry? Would she fight? Would she beg? But Isla Bennett, in her cotton dress and thrift store shoes, did none of those things. She simply stood, took one breath, and then said, softly but clearly enough for every mic to catch, "Thank you for reminding me exactly who I am." Then she turned. She walked away from the microphone she had earned, walked away from the words she had lived, walked slowly, steadily, back down the marble steps, but her dignity stayed. The crowd didn't applaud. They didn't have to. They were too stunned to remember how, until, "Don't forget to grab a broom on your way out." The voice, Savannah again. This time bolder, victorious, drunk on cruelty. And the laughter came again, but something was changing. The tone was different, uneasy, too loud, too sharp. In the far back, a boy with curly hair and a borrowed tux leaned toward his friend. "Why does this feel off?" The friend didn't respond, because now eyes were shifting, not just to Isla, but to the people laughing, to the power structures around them, and outside, the live stream chat exploded. "I can't believe this is happening in front of everyone." She earned that speech. Northbridge should be ashamed. Inside, Isla walked the aisle again. But now she wasn't just surrounded by napkins. She was walking through a corridor of stairs, some mocking, some uneasy, some are ashamed. The digital silence began to crumble. Screens buzzed. Hashtags multiplied. "Let her speak." Hashtag valedictorian heirist. Hashtag cotton courage. A girl 2 rows away put her phone down and stared, really stared, at Isla for the first time and realized something terrifying. She had laughed, mocked, judged, but Isla had never broken. She had stood through it all, and she was still standing now. Her fingers were numb. She couldn't feel the plaque in her hand anymore. Only the slight indentation it left against her skin. The stairs she descended were the same ones she had dreamed of for 4 years. Only in those dreams, her mother was in the front row. Her name was on the program. Her voice echoed through the rafters. Not the jeers, But this wasn't that version of the story. This was something colder, crueler. She walked slowly, chin lifted, not out of pride but necessity. If she looked down, she feared her knees might give. If she met their eyes, she might break, and she would not give them that. Not the smirkers, not the whisperers, not Savannah, especially not Savannah. The crowd leaned in as she passed, like spectators at a funeral where no one cried for the deceased, just watched and waited for her to fall into the grave herself. As she neared the bottom of the stairs, a soft whiff of paper broke the air. A program, rolled tightly and thrown, bounced off the heel of her left shoe and clattered across the marble. Gasps, then laughter. She didn't look back, but they kept going. Someone lobbed a paper straw. It landed inches from her foot. Then a girl in a crystal-drenched gown called out, "You forgot your mop." Another round of laughter. Phones were out again. Every step she took was recorded. Isla knew this video would be shared. By tomorrow, millions would have watched her humiliation from 47 different angles, slowed down, captioned, and turned into sound bites. She also knew something else. She hadn't given them what they wanted. She hadn't run, hadn't screamed, hadn't cried. She had walked, and that meant something. Somewhere. Somehow. She took her seat in the last row, folding into it as if she were tucking herself away from the light. Her plaque, once held like a treasure, now sat across her lap like a stone. The debris continued to arrive. Paper ribbons, napkin balls, even a half-eaten macaron someone tossed like a dare. She didn't move, not until the voice came again. Savannah, standing now, one hand resting on the back of a chair, her other lifted, as if she were addressing a courtroom. "This is exactly why we don't let them in," she declared. Her voice rang out through the hall, smug, polished, unapologetic. She doesn't belong here. She's a janitor's daughter, playing dress up. Northbridge is about legacy, not charity. The crowd buzzed, some amused, some uncomfortable, but no one stopped her. Savannah turned toward the giant screen mounted above the stage, where Isla's image was still frozen, live, in a square bordered by the school's digital logo. "Your mother's watching, isn't she?" she sneered. "Go join her outside, where you both belong." The auditorium erupted. Mock applause, cheers, laughter so loud it nearly drowned out the sound of Isla's heart. Outside, beneath the rising heat of the afternoon sun, Eva Bennett collapsed to her knees. The live stream didn't cut away. It kept rolling. A full broadcast of cruelty, streamed in HD, is available on every platform. Inside, a student near Isla leaned down and said quietly, "Maybe you should go." "This is getting uncomfortable." Isla turned her head just slightly, and in that movement, slow, deliberate, steady, there was something far more powerful than words. It wasn't anger. It wasn't defeat. It was resilience. The kind you forge in silence, in kitchens, in laundromats, in the long walks home after rejection letters. She didn't say a thing, but she rose, again, and began walking toward the door, a slow, graceful exit. Nothing hurried, nothing shattered. As she passed row after row, people fell silent, not because they pitied her, but because they didn't know what else to do. They had expected her to run, to crack, to cry, but she walked like a queen deposed, but not dethroned. The heels of her loafers tapped lightly across the floor. Her cotton dress swayed gently, unbothered by the silk and satin around it. At the edge of the hall, the massive double doors stood open, flooded with light from the late afternoon sun. She moved toward them, and the audience watched, not with laughter now, but something like discomfort, like guilt and shame. Behind her, the crowd remained quiet, until, again, Savannah, who could never leave well enough alone. "Let's give her a round of applause for trying." She clapped, slowly, mockingly. Some of the students joined in. A hollow sound, a performance, the kind of clapping that cuts. But Isla didn't flinch, not even when another program flitted through the air. and skimmed across her ankle. She reached the doorway. Sunlight caught her face, and she turned. Just for a moment, she looked back. The girl in the cotton dress, alone, uninvited, unapologetic. 1,000 cameras watched, but it was the people who couldn't afford to be in the room who felt it most. Outside, the live stream viewers, thousands now, flooded the screen with comments. What kind of school allows this? She deserves better. This is why the system is broken. Isla stepped through the doors and disappeared into the light. The doors had barely finished swinging shut behind Isla when they exploded open again. The sound echoed like thunder through Astoria Grand Hall, silencing the last of Savannah's laughter, swallowing the whispers still clinging to the velvet walls. Everyone turned. Even the quartet, mid-movement, stopped playing. A tall figure strode through the entry in a tailored charcoal suit, his frame slicing through the gold light like a blade. His tie was crisp, knotted with a surgeon's precision. His eyes, steel gray and unflinching, were locked on a single point. At the edge of the light, Isla froze. She had barely cleared the steps when she felt it. The sudden shift in atmosphere. She turned just as the crowd did, and her breath caught Caleb Hawthorne. He didn't walk. He commanded space. The room reacted before it understood. Back straightened, jaws slackened. Phones instinctively lifted to capture him. His name didn't need an introduction. Caleb Hawthorne, heir to Hawthorne Global Industries, a legacy that touched every continent, every sector, and every corner of the modern empire. The kind of name that could sink companies with a whisper, that reshaped futures with a single investment. But today, the man walking toward Isla wasn't just a CEO in the making. He was fury. Contained, targeted, lethal. The faculty scrambled to stand. The dean half rose from his chair, stunned. Students blinked, whispering in panicked disbelief. Is that? No way. What is he doing here? Caleb reached Isla in 6 precise steps. He didn't say a word. Not at first. He reached out and took her hand, gently, reverently, as if touching something sacred. His fingers wrapped around hers. Steady. Sure. And in that single gesture, the entire narrative shattered. Savannah's smirk vanished. Julian Hartford's mouth fell open. Miss Caldwell went pale. The room held its breath. And then Caleb turned, his eyes burning into the crowd, and spoke into the silence. You're not going anywhere. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It hit the back wall like a gavel. Murmurs exploded like sparks. Isla looked up at him, dazed, but Caleb didn't look at her. Not yet. His attention returned to the hall, his posture calm, almost cold. This is a ceremony meant to honor achievement, he said, and yet the only person here who deserves honor was just shoved off the stage for wearing the wrong dress. His words were clean, precise, like someone slicing through glass with a diamond. Let me remind you who I am, he continued. For the last 3 years, my family has been the primary benefactor of this institution. Our donations built this hall, funded half the scholarships, sponsored your partnerships, your PR campaigns, your events. Gasps. More murmurs. Some students looked at their parents, others just stared at the floor. Caleb's voice grew sharper. As of this moment, Hawthorne Global is withdrawing every dollar, every commitment, every sponsorship gone. Julian Hartford stood abruptly. You can't be serious. Caleb turned his gaze on him. Sit down, Julian. Julian sat. Savannah tried to interject, her voice tighter now. This is being blown out of. Caleb cut her off without looking. You emailed my office 37 times in the last 6 months, asking for an internship, a partnership, a seat at my table. He finally looked at her, and his expression didn't change. Now you understand why you never got a reply. Savannah's jaw trembled. Somewhere in the back, someone muttered, "Oh my God." Caleb pulled a slim tablet from his jacket. He stepped forward and projected it to the massive screen behind the stage with a flick of his wrist. Let's talk receipts. The screen lit up. Email log. Savannah Crown to event committee. Subject, remove her. Message, she doesn't fit our image. Fix it next. Bank transfer receipt, $50,000 from Claire Voss to Special Event Adjustment Fund. Then, group chat screenshot, Julian Hartford, Brody Langston, and others throw stuff at her. Make it funny. She won't do anything. She's too scared, the crowd erupted. Shock, horror, gasps, a few curses. And on the live stream, over 200,000 viewers and climbing, the chat exploded. They planned it, exposed them. How did they think they'd get away with this? Caleb lowered the tablet. His voice, now deadly calm. I've already sent this to every board member, every donor, every alumnus. He turned to the dean, who looked like he might faint, and unless Isla Bennett is reinstated, apologized to, and given her rightful place, this school will fall with them. The dean opened his mouth, closed it, then finally found the strength to whisper, "We will fix this." Caleb turned back to Isla. Finally, his voice softened. His thumb brushed lightly against the back of her hand. "Come with me." And together they walked, not back to the seat in the corner, but toward the center stage, where she belonged. The air inside Astoria Grand Hall had changed. It was no longer warm with arrogance. It was cold, sharp, almost reverent, like the moment before a cathedral bell tolls to announce something sacred or something ruined. At center stage, Isla stood with Caleb beside her, his hand still resting gently on hers. The spotlight shifted back toward the podium, but this time it didn't feel like a performance. It felt like a courtroom. The dean of Northbridge Academy, Dr. Forf, Harold Vance, stepped up to the microphone. His posture, usually regal and composed, sagged slightly under the weight of shame. He adjusted the microphone with shaking hands. His voice came out, low, uncertain. We owe this community, this student, and the values we claim to uphold an apology. A ripple moved through the crowd. Uneasy, uncomfortable. He cleared his throat. Miss Isla Bennett was selected by faculty consensus as this year's valedictorian. Her academic record was unmatched. Her leadership is undeniable. Her service is exemplary. His voice cracked, and yet he paused, swallowing. She was removed from her rightful place, silenced, humiliated. Targeted, he turned, eyes scanning the room, avoiding Caleb's piercing stare. We failed her. We failed all of you, because we allowed legacy to eclipse merit. He turned to Isla, his tone smaller now. Miss Bennett, I am deeply sorry. She didn't nod. She didn't cry. She simply stood there unmoving, radiant in her stillness, like truth carved from marble. The dean turned to the security team, standing along the walls. His voice grew firmer. The following individuals are hereby placed under review pending immediate disciplinary action. The room held its breath. Savannah Crown, Claire Voss, Julian Hartford, Brody Langston. Miss Caldwell. Gasps broke like shattering glass. Heads turned. Phones lifted. Savannah stood slowly, trembling. This is a mistake, she said, her voice pitching too high. But it was too late. Two security officers flanked her row. Ms. Crown, please come with us. No, my father is on the board. Your father is not above ethics, Dr. Vance said coldly. Claire Voss tried to slip behind a column cot. Julian Hartford raised both hands in mock innocence, ignored. Miss Caldwell placed her clipboard gently on her seat, as though surrendering a sword. The audience, just moments ago a sea of judgment, now stared in awkward silence as their champions were escorted out. Isla watched, her expression unreadable. Caleb never let go of her hand. Somewhere in the back of the hall, a girl in a coral gown whispered, "This is really happening." Her friend nodded. They thought she was disposable. Another student, one who had laughed earlier, leaned forward now with eyes full of shame. Dr. Vance continued. Effective immediately, all named individuals will be suspended pending full board review. Their academic standing, honors, and future association with Northbridge will be re-evaluated. He turned to the remaining faculty. His voice dropped an octave. And to those who stood by while this unfolded, your silence will be reviewed as complicity. Silence. A long, heavy silence. Then, slowly, applause. It began with a teacher near the edge of the stage, then a student, then another, then dozens, until the hall trembled with it. But it wasn't the manic, gleeful applause from before. It was quieter, softer, earnest, meant not to celebrate victory but to acknowledge something more sacred, that justice had finally stood up and spoken. Isla, still beside Caleb, turned toward the crowd. Their eyes met hers, and this time, they didn't look away, because they saw her now, not as a charity case, not as a punchline, but as a mirror. And in that reflection, they saw what they had done. Doctor, Vance stepped aside. Miss Bennett, if you would, please reclaim the podium. The world held its breath again. Isla stepped forward. Her fingers brushed the edges of the podium, as if it were a familiar shoreline she was finally allowed to touch. She placed the plaque down in front of her and spoke. You all know my name now, but most of you didn't know it yesterday. Her voice was soft, but the acoustics made every syllable shimmer. You knew my grades, my face. Some of you even knew my story. She paused. But what you didn't know, what you refused to believe, is that I earned this place. Every inch of it. There were no coughs, no rustles, no whispers. My mother worked double shifts at Penny's Diner to buy my textbooks. I studied under buzzing fluorescent lights and skipped meals so I could afford public transit. But none of that made me less worthy. Her fingers curled slightly against the wood. What makes someone worthy isn't who their parents are, or what they wear. It's what they choose when no one is watching. Her voice strengthened. And I chose not to hate you, even when you laughed, even when you threw things, even when you told me without words or with them that I didn't belong. She let the silence stretch. But I do. The audience sat motionless. And so do others like me, the ones who clean your dorms, the ones who fill your cafeteria trays, the ones whose names you never bothered to learn. A few students shifted uncomfortably. They belong. We all do. She lifted her chin. And after today, I promise you no one like me will ever feel invisible here again. Applause erupted again, this time stronger, louder, unstoppable. Tears streamed freely now from faculty, students, staff watching on screens, and alumni tuning in live. Even Caleb's jaw was tight with emotion, and Eva, watching from outside, hands still pressed to the screen, finally smiled. A full, bright, tear-drenched smile. Her baby had done it. Not just survived, not just endured. She had transformed everything. The standing ovation was thunderous, but Isla didn't bask in it. She let the applause wash over her, let it echo off the crystal chandeliers and the marble walls. But she didn't smile, didn't bow, didn't grandstand. She simply stepped back from the podium and turned toward her mother. The live stream screen mounted high above the rear doors flickered slightly, catching the exact moment Isla's gaze met the lens. Outside, under the arch of the sky and the neon glow of the outdoor display, Eva Bennett was still on her knees. She had never stopped watching, not when they mocked her child, not when they tried to erase her, not when they forced her out, and not now, especially not now. Her lips trembled, hands pressed to her mouth as tears poured silently down her cheeks. She wasn't crying out of pain anymore. This was something different, something rare. This was the overwhelming weight of pride that refused to be small. From the stage, the dean stepped forward once more, but this time his expression had changed. Gone was the cold, rehearsed mask. Now his face bore something softer, humbled, honest. He approached Isla carefully, like someone approaching something fragile and sacred. Miss Bennett, he said into the mic, I know no words can undo what has happened today, but I ask you to allow us to begin repairing it. He turned toward the audience. Today, Northbridge Academy officially launches the Isla Bennett Fellowship for Leadership and Integrity, a full tuition, needs-based scholarship awarded annually to a student whose actions reflect courage, resilience, and compassion in the face of adversity. A hush fell again, then applause, not scattered, unified. Even students who had been silent before stood now, some with heads lowered in regret, some with eyes shining with hope. The dean turned to the camera, voice quieter now. Ms. Eva Bennett. Outside, Eva was startled. Her eyes widened. Your strength, your sacrifice, and your love built this young woman. You are the foundation beneath her brilliance. Her name flashed on the screen below the live stream. Eva Bennett, Northbridge Inspiration of the Year, for extraordinary contribution to her daughter's academic success. Eva dropped her head into her hands, sobbing openly now. A woman nearby helped her up. Another passed her tissues. A stranger hugged her. The crowd surrounding the outdoor screen began clapping, chanting her name. Eva! Eva! Eva. Inside, the screen above the stage split into a new image, a live feed of Eva outside. Surrounded by people clapping, the students inside turned to look, and when they did, they saw her, not the janitor, not the outsider, a mother, a hero. Caleb moved beside Isla, squeezing her hand gently. Then, from his jacket pocket, he pulled out a folded letter, thick paper, embossed. He handed it to the dean. This is from the board of Hawthorne Global, he said. We're pledging $10 million in match donations to expand Isla's scholarship. Any student who comes from a background like hers, who leads with values like hers, will never again wonder if they belong here. The hall was stunned. Isla didn't blink, because she had known it, known that her story would not end in shame, but in light, in legacy. At the back of the hall, a small group of younger students whispered among themselves, I didn't know her before today, but I'll never forget her now. That dress was never plain. It was just honest, another said softly. She walked through fire and didn't burn. On stage, Isla approached the podium again. This time, she spoke not from her notes, not from a script, but from something deeper, from the marrow of her truth. This stage was never meant for me, she began. And yet, I'm here, not because I bought my way in, not because of a name, but because I chose to believe that I belonged, even when the world told me otherwise. She looked out across the crowd, for those watching who feel invisible, small, silenced. You are not less. You are more than the brand stitched on your collar. You are more than your bank account, your shoes, your background. Her voice tightened. My mother scrubbed kitchens at night and prayed I'd never have to. Today, I carry her in every word I say, every step I take, and I promise this is not the end. She held her plaque aloft, its edges gleaming like gold against the lights. This is the beginning. The applause was deafening. It rolled like thunder, like a tide, like something elemental rising from the earth itself, and through it, she saw him, Caleb, waiting beside the stage, arms crossed, eyes soft. He didn't clap. He just watched her the way someone watched the first sunrise after a long, long night, with awe. When the final name was called, and the string quartet resumed their music, the ceremony officially ended, but no one left. They stayed in their seats, in the aisles, near the exits, as if moving too soon would break whatever spell had been cast, and maybe it would have, because something had shifted, not just in the air, but in the walls of Astoria Grand Hall itself. It no longer felt like a fortress built to contain legacies. It felt like a room that had witnessed its own transformation, from exclusion to awakening. Isla stood just beneath the stage lights, her cotton dress still creased at the sleeves, her shoes scuffed, her braids slightly undone at the edges. But no one commented now. No one smirked. They just watched her, in awe, in silence, in respect. Outside, the street had become a gathering place. What started as a handful of passers-by had grown into hundreds, and, growing still, Eva Bennett had been ushered into the center, not by force, but by admiration. Strangers offered her water, a stool, a warm coat. Someone wrapped her hand in theirs. Without asking, she couldn't stop crying. But she smiled through every tear. "That's my baby up there," she whispered. Again and again, "That's my girl," above her. The live stream camera lingered on her face, tears streaked and shining. As Isla's voice played in the background on replay, "You are more than the brand stitched on your collar." Social media had gone volcanic. By now, Isla's speech had been clipped, shared, remixed, and subtitled in 3 languages. Twitter X was flooded. Hashtag Isla Bennett. Hashtag Cotton Knot Crystals. Hashtag Let Her Speak. Hashtag She Belonged All Along. TikTok stitched her into videos of other quiet victories. A waitress refusing to be demeaned. A student opening her first acceptance letter. A nurse reuniting with her child after a night shift. She became a symbol, not because she wanted to, because they needed her to be. Inside the hall, the dean approached her again, this time with no cameras, no script. He spoke softly. "We'd like to feature your speech in the school's annual report and name the next leadership award after you." Isla paused, then nodded once. Not for him. For the students watching in the back. For the girl who might sit there next year. For the version of herself who almost didn't come today. As the students began exiting row by row, Caleb appeared beside her once more. His presence had not dimmed. It had simply changed, from storm to shelter. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. He held out his arm. She took it. And together, they walked back down the aisle, the same one she'd been forced to walk earlier, alone, surrounded by trash. Now, the floor was clear. The air is different. The silence, reverent. No one threw anything. No one whispered. Some reached out and touched her arm in passing. A few murmured, "I'm sorry." A student in a sapphire dress, one who had once laughed too loudly, stepped aside to let her pass. Her eyes flicked downward. At the doors, Caleb paused, turned to her, and for the first time that day, his voice dropped into something softer, something only she could hear. "You know what's wild?" She looked up at him. "They still don't realize. You walked through that entire hell and never once lowered your head." She smiled, tired but real. The double doors opened again, and for the second time that afternoon, Isla stepped out into the light. But this time, she wasn't walking alone. She wasn't met with laughter. She was met with thunder, cheers, applause, flashbulbs. A crowd that had grown from a quiet circle to an ocean of faces, all turned toward her. She blinked into the light, then saw her mother. Eva stood at the front of the barricade, hands covering her mouth, eyes wide and trembling. Isla rushed toward her. They collided in the center, a tangle of arms and tears and laughter. The cameras caught it. Every network did, because this was the picture worth 1,000 apologies. A daughter who had been told she wasn't enough, a mother who never stopped believing otherwise, and a world that had watched their story and been changed by it. In the days that followed, things moved fast. Natalie Harrington, Savannah Crown, and Claire Voss were officially expelled. Their families issued press releases and lawyered statements, but the internet was already writing its truth. Miss Caldwell lost her position and her PR contract with 3 major firms. The Northbridge Board announced a full diversity and inclusion audit, and the Isla Bennett Fellowship received over $1.2 million in donations in the first 72 hours. Isla didn't give more speeches that week. She didn't do interviews. She just went home, back to the 1-bedroom apartment where Eva kept the kitchen spotless and the fridge humble. She helped wash dishes, sat on the couch, ate reheated lasagna, and breathed. The world outside changed, but inside, she stayed grounded because she knew what mattered. She'd always known. Spring drifted into the evening. The air outside Astoria Grand Hall was no longer thick with tension or judgment. It carried something lighter now, hope, maybe. A strange new peace clung to the marble steps, like morning dew. The crowd had dispersed slowly, respectfully, not with the electric frenzy of celebrity, but with the stillness people carry when they know they've just witnessed something holy. A moment they'll tell their children about. I was there. I saw her walk. She wore a cotton dress. Isla and Caleb stood on the stone platform just beyond the main entrance. Beneath the last golden rays of the sun, her fingers rested lightly in his, her hair tousled by the wind, braid nearly undone. He watched her, not like a man watching history, but like a man watching the woman who had written it. She turned toward him slowly, and for the first time all day, let herself exhale fully. "It's quiet now," she said. Caleb nodded. "It'll never be that loud again." She looked down at her dress. A simple cotton thing, worn, soft, but in it, she had survived hell and turned it into grace. Caleb reached into his jacket. "I was going to wait." A small smile. "I had a plan. A skyline restaurant. Champagne. String quartet." She raised an eyebrow. Amused. "Sounds nice." He dropped his gaze. Just for a second. Then looked back up. "But you don't need a stage to be powerful." And with that, he knelt right there, on the concrete steps of a hall that had once rejected her, now silent, now bearing witness. He pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, a ring, not loud, not oversized, but elegant, thoughtful, timeless, just like her. The world blurred around them. Even the sky paused. Even time bowed. "Isla Bennett," he said, voice low and sure. "You're not just my heart. You're my compass. You've walked through fire and changed the ground beneath you. Will you marry me?" She didn't cry. Not yet. But her smile split wide. Bright. Bold. "You're asking me now?" she teased. "After I've had the worst day of my life." He stood gently, took her hand. "No," he said. "I'm asking you after you turned the worst day of your life into something no one will ever forget." And then she nodded. Yes. And the world, already watching, roared again. Cameras caught it. Media outlets broke the news before the ring was fully on her finger. But Isla didn't notice, because she wasn't living for the camera. She was living for the moment. Weeks later, her story still surged through the public consciousness. Every headline found its way back to her. The girl in the cotton dress who shook the world. Isla Bennett, from valedictorian to visionary. When dignity defeated privilege and made history, Savannah Crown's family attempted damage control. It failed. Julian Hartford disappeared from social circles. Rumors swirled about revoked trust funds and PR rehab. Northbridge Academy published an open letter, co-authored by Isla herself, titled, "Belonging Can't Be Bought." It went viral. She declined offers from publishers, TV networks, even political parties, because this moment was not for monetizing, it was for meaning. At the first board meeting of the new term, the dean introduced Isla not as a student, but as a board-appointed advisor to the Office of Equity and Inclusion. She didn't sit at the back of the room. She sat beside the head chair. Her name now adorned a wall near the entrance, the ISLA Bennett Courtyard, for those who came from nothing, and changed everything. And one quiet morning, weeks later, Isla walked back onto the grounds of Northbridge. No fanfare, no crowd, just her and her mother. Eva held a cup of coffee in one hand, a paper bag in the other. Inside, 2 cinnamon rolls, her favorite. They sat on a bench near the edge of the courtyard, watching spring unfurl around them. "Never thought I'd see my name on a building," Eva murmured, laughing softly. Isla smiled. "You're the reason my name is there." Eva squeezed her hand. "You're the reason the door stayed open." They sat there, in the early light. No titles, no speeches, no applause. Just a girl who once wore a cotton dress, and the mother who had patched it. Some say legacy is born in wealth, but maybe, just maybe, legacy is stitched in silence, in standing when no one claps, in walking out when no one follows, in rising with grace when the room wants to see you fall. Because Isla Bennett didn't need diamonds. She was the light.